Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Prodly and ATG. They team up to accelerate ROI on Salesforce Billing. My name is Tori Beeler, and I will be your moderator for today's webinar. I'm going to run through a few housekeeping items before we get started, just so that you guys know how to use our platform. To the left of your screen, you should see the slides. This is where we're going to be presenting all the information to you. We will be giving the slides out to you guys at the end, just in PDF form. That way you guys have them with you. All the links will be in there. To your right side, you should see 3 tabs. There is a first tab that says chat. And if you guys joined us, there may already be some chatting back and forth in there. But go ahead and let us know that you hear us okay, where you are in the world, and anything else you want to say. You know, hello, happy Thursday. We'd love to hear it. So if you're on and you can hear us, please go ahead and type into that chat now. That's going to be our main method of communication back and forth. I'll wait just a couple minutes. All right, thank you, Cindy. I know you guys can hear us. Okay, anyone else want to say hi and let us know where you're from? I'm in San Francisco right now. We've got a few instructors from Salt Lake City. Hi, Jody. Always a pleasure to see you. Glad to have you on. And also from Missoula today. Okay, so I'm going to move along. So the next tab that you should see there is our questions tab. And this is where you're going to be asking any questions if you're maybe a little shy to ask them in the chat. We'll be monitoring the chat a lot more, but if you do have a question that you want to have specifically answered or get a little more time on, or maybe you're a little shy to ask it, please put it in that questions tab. And finally, you should see the polling tab. And I've got a single poll in there for you guys right now with one question, and it's just to understand what brought you here to the webinar today and what's your main reason for signing up. Are you currently implementing Salesforce Billing? Are you getting ready to implement? Are you just looking to purchase? Are you a partner? Let us know in the polling section there. All right, and as those come in, I'm going to go ahead and pass this off to our instructor for today. So Dave Stufflebeam will be leading this webinar. So Stuff, whenever you're ready.
What if I'm not ready? No, just kidding. Welcome, everybody. Glad to see everybody on, and grateful for you all taking a little bit of your time out of your day to spend with us and the team at ATG as well. If I say AGT, that's just because we've been watching the show, so I apologize in advance. So again, yeah, we're going to spend the next few minutes here basically kind of giving you an overview idea of, maybe some of the pain points, things, what it takes to basically get billing up and running. We're going to let Sonia Flamm from ATG discuss kind of the how basically billing is implemented and then maintained afterwards, and the different phases that you might go through for implementing billing. And then we're going to introduce Moover to you because billing, like CPQ and like advanced approvals, which I assume if you have billing, you probably have the other quote to cash solutions as well, because they're kind of required. All of that data stores as reference data, which means reference data just simply means the data that is configuration data that is stored as record data instead of metadata. So when you go to do all of your configurations and everything that you do inside of setting up your legal entity, your aging buckets, your tax stuff, and all that fun stuff, all of that ends up as record data, not metadata. So when you do a change set between your Salesforce orgs, none of that comes over. So you need to then move that record data over, and with tools like Data Loader and different things, that can become a challenge. So we're going to introduce Moover to you and talk about how we have these pre-built templates and how that solves the reference data deployment challenge that folks face with deploying reference data. Then we're actually going to do a Moover demo, and then we're going to turn some time over to another team member at ATG, Kristen, who's on the line with us as well, and she's going to discuss how ATG uses Moover. And there's actually a specific team that is dedicated to doing the deployments. And if I'm wrong on that exactly, Kristen, please correct me when it comes time. But I've worked with Matt Matt Ryan and his team and trained them on how to do Moover last year, and spend a lot of time with them on the phone doing guided deployments. And so they're definitely using Moover to move different types of reference data as well. With that said, I'm actually going to give a minute here, a couple minutes. Sonia, if you wanted to take a minute and let everybody know about ATG and yourself, and give us a little bio from there.
Great, thank you so much, Steph. And just to confirm, can you hear me okay on your end?
Yes, we can hear you loud and clear, finally.
Perfect, perfect. Thank you so much. So welcome everybody, and thank you for that awesome intro, both Tori and Steph. As they mentioned, my name is Sonia Flamm, and I work for a company called Advanced Technology Group, or as we're calling it, we like to go by ATG. So we are a consulting company that focuses in quote to cash, both strategy as well as implementation. So we help improve processes along payment collections, revenue lifecycle, and all those fun things that are happening between quote to cash. So specifically, my role at ATG is helping lead our Salesforce practice, and I help run our Salesforce billing practice. So I am a billing, Salesforce billing, what we call evangelist. So I've been working with the product for a couple years now, since it was first acquired by Salesforce. And then I've been working throughout the years as not only a trainer helping enable other consultants and customers using the platform, but also heavily involved with our project work. So I'm happy here today to talk about some of the lessons that I've learned throughout the past years about implementing the Salesforce billing product, and to hopefully help you guys through that process as well and make it a little bit more easy and streamlined for you. Before I hand back off to Steph, I just wanted to give my colleague, Kristen Owens, just a quick chance to give an introduction for myself.
Great idea.
Absolutely. Hi, everybody. Great to talk to you today. So as Sonia said, my name is Kristen Owens. I work on ATG's deployment team. As she said, we are quote to cash SMEs, so we work a lot in this reference data space, and we use Prodly day to day on a lot of different types of deployments to speed things up for us. So I'd love to share some things with you later on in the webinar about how we use Prodly day to day in real life scenarios with our client. So thank you, Steph. Back to you.
Awesome. Thanks. And then I will give just a quick overview about Prodly. Prodly's been around for a number of years now. We got our original start. Our founder and CTO, Daniel Rudman, invented Moover. He himself is a Salesforce developer and maintains a pretty popular managed package out there in the workspace for Salesforce. And he was tired of manually creating record data in Dev Sandbox to test against. And so he created Moover, which then allowed him to pull actual record data from production down into his dev environments and create these data sets that he could rerun at any particular time and be able to populate the sandboxes for him to develop. He happened to show this technology to his older brother, Max Redman. Some of you may recognize that name. Max Redman is the founder and inventor of SteelBrick, which is now Salesforce CPQ. Max took a look at this and saw that there was an opportunity to use the same technology to go from a sandbox back to production, because like billing, CPQ and advanced approvals and other tools that use record data to store the configuration, aka reference data, that is typically developed in a sandbox and then pushed forward and promoted up to higher environments for training, and then actually then into production. So there was actually a relationship bonded there between SteelBrick and Prodly at the time. And then when when SteelBrick was acquired, the relationship was broke off, and then that's when we formally founded Prodly, and then we've formally released the first toolkit that we have, which was under Salesforce CPQ, and then we developed out the advanced approvals and the billing. We actually have several other. Well, we have one more, which is Field Service Lightning, as well as we are currently working on Cloud Craze or Salesforce B2B. We hope to have an announcement about that here in the coming weeks about when that is going to be released. So again, we're not just around moving CPQ or advanced approval or billing data. If it is record data and it's in one org, you can create a data set and pick that up and deploy it from any Salesforce org. And I'm going to show you a little bit of that today. Myself, I do go by stuff because there's like 85 Daves in the company, so I go by stuff. I'm a senior solutions engineer here, so my role is I am actually the product manager of all of our toolkits that we're developing out. So we also, part of that process of these toolkits is we maintain them, upgrade them to the latest versions. And so they're always downloadable from our website, and out of the box, we'll pick up this reference data and move it from one org to the other. So I manage all of that and make sure that they're updated. A little behind on CPQ because 220 is out and we're still in 218, but we'll get there. And then also my role, I've seeing who's on the list here, I've probably said hello to most of you at one point or the other because I'm also involved in the pre-sales side, from the technical side, pre-sales support, as well as training all of our partners and onboarding and the webinars, the CPQ workshops. I do a lot of stuff here. I have a lot of fun, and I get to work with great partners like ATG and Sonia and these industry experts that know how these tools are configured, and then they know and understand the schema, and we can quickly put out a toolkit like one for billing, something as complex as billing. The experts like Sonia and team at ATG make it super simple. It would take me a month of Sundays to figure out what they know. So we're grateful for their relationship. And Sonia is going to talk about the billing in phases. Here you go, Sonia.
Awesome. Thank you very much. So as Steph already alluded to earlier in this webinar, a lot of times when we're looking at a Salesforce billing implementation, we're looking at it in multiple phases. Billing in general is tough. When we look at billing projects in general across multiple different systems, not just specific to Salesforce, they're tough implementations. They're generally a lot longer, and they also generally have a higher chance of failure just due to the complexity and the amount of different things that you are changing within an organization. So you're touching a lot of different components within other systems to be able to implement a billing system. So that's why when we start looking at an implementation, we really try to break it down so that we can make sure that the customer is successful and they can see those quick wins and keep moving forward. So in this diagram we have here, it's just to represent that you might be going through an implementation where to kick off your Salesforce quote to cash implementation, you might go through and implement Salesforce CPQ first as your phase one. We're using all of your lead and opportunity functionality, and then adding on quoting and ordering as well. There you can use Prodly Moover, of course, to move that functionality from sandbox to sandbox and then push it into production. And then you also have that functionality available to you if you need to make any updates, which is perfect because when we start to get into Salesforce billing, so maybe we do a phase two where now we're going to start using invoice functionality within Salesforce. That means, one, we may need to do some updates to maybe our products as well as other records around CPQ, as well as a lot of the implementation around Salesforce billing, just like CPQ, is really heavy in record data. So that means there's record data that you need to set up. You might need to iterate through that record data as you're building out your solutions. And then as you are deploying and testing that solution, you're going to need to push that record data through different orgs. So being able to seamlessly do that through different sandboxes so that you can get testing done more quickly and efficiently is always a big win. And then again, because you might be doing multiple phases where phase three might be adding in some payment functionality into Salesforce, you might once again need to go through the process of updating records and going through that testing process again through all of your sandbox and pushing into production. So there's really always a life cycle. When we're working with record data in the first place, there's always a component of maintenance that you'll need to do. If you've worked in a billing system, there's always going to be some sort of data maintenance that you need to do, again, regardless of the system. But with Salesforce billing, I should say Salesforce CPQ and billing and Prodly, that entire life cycle of implementing a solution and maintaining that solution is much easier when you get to use a tool like Prodly, because then it's taking a lot of that manual process out of it, where one, you can introduce errors, you could introduce potentially some mismatches between orgs, Prodly's kind of taking away that risk. And again, just really helping improve the day-to-day tasks sometimes of either an implementation consultant or even an employee that's an admin at a company that has CPQ and billing as their solution. So again, it's just really important to keep those things aligned as you're going through implementations. And just because there's going to be a lot of iteration, a lot of updates you're probably going to go through, using a tool like Prodly really helps out with that.
Awesome.
Stuff.
Awesome. Thanks, Sonia. With that, one question that I would like to throw out to the group, kind of off the hip here, kind of going away from the slides a little bit, looking at some of the people that are on here, I know there's some that have actually done reference data deployment manually. So if you have done reference data deployment manually, whether it be CPQ or what's that other one? Advanced approvals, my brain's locking up, or even billing. How long did it take you? And that was moving from maybe a dev sandbox to a QA or a QA to a UAT. And were you able to do it effectively and without errors? So if you wanted to maybe throw just something quickly in a chat while I present the next bit of information here, it would be interesting to kind of review if any of you have done anything like that, and I'll share some thoughts there as well, because this is not easy. Just kind of this complex structure that Sonia was talking about for billing. I know CPQ a lot better since I've been helping people literally deploy it every day for the last 2 years, pretty much. And just to do a deployment with CPQ from one org to another, getting all of the objects and the full configuration is anywhere from about 15 to 25 hours manually with a data loader. Sonia, how long have you seen, or Kristen, how long have you guys seen it take to actually do a full deployment manually with billing? And billing's it doesn't have as many objects as CPQ, but it is highly relational still.
That's a great question, and I'll answer it first, and I'll hand it off to Kristen for her input. From my perspective, before we even had Prodly, because, like you said, it's not as many records sometimes as CPQ, but with billing, there's actually many more lookups between the objects. So not as many records, but a lot more relationships. So when you start to look at one record, it might be 5 lookups to other records. And so being able to relationships takes a lot of time, and a lot of you're either clicking into the system trying to find them and then grabbing that ID or whatever you're trying to do. But from my perspective, it could take almost a full day just to get some basic data from one org to the other. And so 8 hours almost, I would say it sometimes. I don't know, Kristen, do you have any input?
Oh, that's absolutely. So I agree with you on kind of the overall timeline that it usually takes us. On the deployment team, we would, before Prodly, we had a lot of different tools that we'd try to use to kind of patch together and make the process more seamless for us. But rebuilding those relationships can be really complicated, and it could take us a day or more to do the record data part of a deployment without Prodly. So I would say.
Awesome.
Yeah, awesome. And you two both segued so well into my next slide. I just switched while you were all talking about it, because there are 22 objects that make up the reference data side of CPQ. So if you look at our templates that are in our toolkit that I'm going to show you here in just a little bit, overall there are 22 objects. There are 13 data sets, and these 22 objects are throughout. But as Sonia was saying, it is highly relational, and there's lookups upon lookups upon lookups, and mapping all of that and getting those relationships, and knowing when you're deploying it manually with a data loader, knowing which object comes first, second, third, and fourth. And then when you're deploying it from one Salesforce org to the other, all of the record IDs are changing. So you're doing VLOOKUPs and remapping of parent-child. And there's many steps of exporting and re-importing and exporting just to get a single relationship mapped, let alone, just 22 objects mapped with all of their relationships to all the other objects. So it is not easy, and the thing of it is based on what Sonia was talking about, the different testing and the different environments. You're going to do this more than once. and once you do it once, you're not going to want to do it again, right? So Moover handles the automation of when it deploys the records from one org to the other, remapping all of the record IDs from one org to the other, also detecting existing records and updating them if they exist and inserting them if they don't, and then remapping the relationships as well. So this is also another thing that may not be known. If you try to deploy billing data on your own, not only do you have to deeply know and understand the schema in which objects need to be deployed first, but you also have to choose and know and understand which data actually needs to be there first. It's not just so much about the relationships. If I'm bringing over, my invoice plan and, all that other stuff and the objects that are related to that, but also I need to understand that legal entities probably need to be there first, right? So deploying the objects, the reference data objects, and building that foundation that the rest of the data actually sits upon is just as important as getting all of the relationships mapped and everything. So with the expertise of ATG and the fact that they have done this more than anybody else, they know and understand the deployment, the order of operations of which objects need to come first, second, third, and fourth, and so on. So we've actually put together here deployment plans. I'll show this as part of my demo, but we've actually got a guide that talks about what order and everything needs to come in here. Sonia, is there anything else that you wanted to add here that I may have missed some points about the order of operations and getting the data over in the right order?
I think the only thing I'll add is, something that is somewhat similar to CPQ. Sometimes you may not use a product or something. It's really important to deploy these in specific steps that are listed, but then you may run into scenarios where you are not using some functionality around aging buckets, so step 9. So it's important to kind of understand, and like Steph was just saying, the instructions are really great to kind of help you walk through certain things where you may not need to worry about that step, but one step you really need to do no matter what. So it's a great instructions. I highly recommend going through them.
Awesome, thank you. So now let's talk about the Moover Toolkit for Salesforce Billing. This basically is an out-of-the-box solution that'll allow you to pick up the billing reference data and deploy it from one Salesforce org to the other with minimal configuration. And basically, you're taking this, highly intensive, you got to be kind of, a big, smart data architect person to be able to do this, and now you can pass it off to a junior person. What this includes, the toolkit includes, is the Moover Salesforce app. The Moover app is a managed package that installs in your production org. And there's two parts of it. There is the managed package, and then the Moover service that runs in the Moover cloud. The Moover service is the actual component that picks up the record data and deploys it from one org to the other using OAuth. It's very secure. We never store any record data in our cloud, and it's all purged when it's done, stored in memory or RAM. But it comes with the Moover app, the Salesforce billing templates, as well as the deployment plan that I was showing on the previous, as well as the deployment guide that talks about step-by-step everything you need to know before you click deploy inside Moover. That has all of the pre-deployment checklists, during deployment checklists, post-deployment checklists, so that when you are ready to do that first implementation or first deployment from one org to the other, you know everything you need to do from that standpoint. Plus, it comes with our expert support as well. And also on this, like I said before, we do have toolkits for Salesforce Advanced Approvals as well as Salesforce CPQ that are all part of this. We have the full quote to cash solution when it comes to picking up that reference data and going from one org to the other. Okay, so automating the billing challenge process, and Sonia kind of alluded to this, and Sonia, if you want to butt in at any point here, or maybe even Kristen talk about some of the things that you've seen. But this is a typical architecture of where you have developers, building things out in sandboxes, and you are then pushing that configuration data from your dev to your QA. That's one hop typically. Typically there's 3 hops in that, and maybe a 4th with training. But then you're going to vet it, make sure it works. There might be some more changes, update fixes, and another push, and be able to update this again when then it comes time to go to staging or to UAT, user acceptance training. That is another push as well. And then finally a push into production. So this process, this very manual process with billing that takes anywhere from 8 to 10 hours just for the billing portion to get there, you're going to do that typically 1 to 2 to 1 to 3, 4 times, depending on your infrastructure. The advantage to automating this process is that it allows you to set up an agile development lifecycle and also keep to that schedule. Simply because we're taking that 8 to 9 hours, that 10 hours, and shrinking it down to 30 minutes to an hour. And now that's also being done by a junior person instead of your smartest data architect person. It also eliminates the process of needing to make changes in production as well. You would be surprised, and you may be one of the ones that I've actually talked to that have done this, where once you're implemented, especially with tools that have highly relational reference data, that it is so difficult to pick up things that you need to make changes to and push them from org to org and get that agile development lifecycle going, that you just opt out of this, and you might develop a new rule or a new process or a new whatever inside your dev, make sure it works, and then reproduce that and copy field for field and just paste it right into production and go live with it there. I've helped many people that just they're doubling up the work and they don't know that a tool like Moover exists, and they can just click a button and poof, everything is auto-magically done, right? So it allows you to create and maintain a sprint schedule, and then it allows you to maintain one org as a source of truth, depending on where you are in your implementation lifecycle. Dev might be your source of truth at one point, but once you've implemented, production might be your source of truth as well. Sonia, is there anything that you wanted to add to this, or even Kristen?
This is Sonia. I have one thing to add, but I also don't want to steal Kristen's thunder for later on. But one thing that I know resources here at ATG struggle with it, and more going towards developers, is because there's so much record data between CPQ and billing. In order for a developer to really effectively create a solution, they need samples of that record data all the way through the quoting, ordering, invoicing process. And so again, being able, like you said, Steph, to quickly get that information into an org so we don't have to basically be the bottleneck for that developer really becomes critical. Because again, that developer is relying on record data to build their solution around, because it's a combination of record data, metadata, and that metadata existing with, sometimes custom Apex.
Awesome. I couldn't have said that better. Of course, it's Sonia. Okay, so I think for the next few minutes, what we will do is we will actually show you a little bit of Moover, introduce you to the toolkit, and actually do a deployment. It's really simple. I'm not a billing expert. I only play a Salesforce administrator on TV, so but I do know Moover really well. So hopefully we can have some fun here. So this is Moover. It's the managed package. This is what installs in your production org. And it's the central place where everybody that needs to do something with Moover is going to go to. Moover only needs to be installed in one location. And from there, you make connections out to all of your other Salesforce orgs. Now, we have a mix of audience members. We have some system integrators that are companies like ATG on the line. So you might put Moover in your production org and reach out and make connection to your client source and the dev and the QA and the UAT, and be able to move data between your client's org, even though Moover is installed in your org. That's totally doable. And then also, if you're a potential customer of ours, then Moover would just install in your production org, and then you would make connection to all of your other sandboxes, whether they be devs, dev pros, partials, or fulls. These are OAuth connections. It is the same security that you're used to using every day with Salesforce, and the connections are stored in the org that Moover's installed in. We call that a control org. And then again, you can, through security, give access to different connections through Salesforce sharing rules and everything, because these are just simple records inside Salesforce. So if you have developers that you want, that, like Sonia was describing, that they need data to be able to dev and test against, and if you want to give them the ability to use Moover to see their own sandboxes, you can do that, and then you can limit which connections they can see. Like you may never want them to see production, so you don't share that with them, or mark production as a read only so that they can't accidentally push record data to production as well. Once you have your connections established, then you start to work on your data sets. And the data sets are just the mapping of the schema. It doesn't contain any actual record data, but it just contains the information about which object I'm starting with and what related objects I would like to deploy along with that. So if we look at something like invoice plan, which I think has a few objects here, that will take us into the data set editor. You can see here we're starting with invoice plan. But again, to kind of reinforce, I have the ability to see all of the objects within my Salesforce org. Okay, so here you can see I have, there's CPQ as well as advanced approvals. I think there might be some Conga in here as well. But the idea is I have the ability to see all of my objects. Once I pick my root object, then Moover shows me a curated list of everything that's related. So that the first benefit is I don't have to be a Salesforce schema expert, because Moover will show me only what's related to invoice plan. So I can see there's billing treatment and invoice plan line. I can go into invoice plan line. I don't know if there is lookups here that we're including, but these data sets are configured to only include the objects that are related to invoice plan and the reference data that is needed to bring that across. Okay, so when I start with an object, it will bring everything that's related. I also have the ability to filter. So if I'm in a maintenance phase or an updating phase, maybe I've done a full deployment, I've updated a couple of invoice plans, and I just want to push a specific one over and its related data, then I can do a valid SOCL where clause here. Also, Moover has the ability to bring over missing fields and sync pick list field values, and these are checked as part of the billing templates as well as the CPQ. But what that means is if you've created custom fields inside of your source org and haven't done a change set to bring those fields over, Moover will create them prior to the deployment and then bring those field values along with them, and then sync the pick list field values as well. So that's kind of just a general overview of what a data set might look like. And again, just to kind of reinforce, all of these data sets 1 through 13 is what it takes to do a full deployment with for billing. And as Sonia was saying, you in the earlier slide where you're going through phases, you might not need all of these. So all of these together will cover all of the facets and features of billing. Or you can use them one by one or group them together and use only the ones that are needed. So they're modular enough that they can be independent or deployed in full. Same with like the CPQ ones. All of these ones from line 16 down will take advantage of doing a full deployment of CPQ data from one org to the other, or you have the ability to use them one-on-one. And just move modular, very focused data as well. Okay, let's go ahead, and I'm just going to do, because of time, and we don't have too much time, I'm just going to move legal entities. So in my source, I believe I have 3 legal entities. So just to show you how Moover works, I'm going to go grab the data set, click deploy. I will pick my source org and then pick my destination org. By the way, if I had more connections in here, I could deploy up to 5 destinations at the same time. So if I was, like Sonia was saying, I've got developers that are sitting there waiting, I could deploy this same data set to up to 5 developer sandboxes at the same time, or any other orgs. I'm going to click deploy here. Now Moover goes into bulk API mode now. And so this is where we basically go into, lack of a better explanation, super awesome data loader mode. So we'll wait for the bulk API to kick off. You'll get an email when that has started, and then you'll start to see the objects come over in batches. Now the one I kicked off, just for time's sakes, it only has one object in it. So we're only going to see one batch come through. But the cool thing is we're going to see the operation. So if these records existed already and Moover knew that they were there, we would have seen an update operation instead of an insert. And here we're showing the upsert method. So I mentioned before, Moover has the ability to identify existing records in the destination, update them if they exist, and insert them if they don't. Virtual external ID is one of the methods that we use to identify existing records and even track record movement from org to org to org. We don't have time to get into the details of this. We actually have some other resources, workshops and things that you can get in where we deep dive into this. But just to kind of show what happens here, again, this is a pretty simple, I think there's even just 3 records that came across, but you have the ability to see all of the records that came over as part of that batch. If there was multiple batches, we'd be able to see them batch by batch. I can see the source URL as well as the destination URL, where it was deployed to. If there was an error, Moover would error out on that particular record, and then you would see the error message here. So just to kind of show you that I did bring something over, I'm looking at the destination URL, and then there's the legal entity atomic security. This is just demo data from one of the Salesforce quote to cash demo orgs that they've given us to proof out the templates as well. The last thing I want to talk about here are the deployment plans. The deployment plans are the pre-built order of operations, or the automating the whole entire process. So we have a deployment plan for CPQ advanced approvals as well as billing. So we talked a little bit about the order of operations and making sure you get the right objects in and lay that foundation first. This deployment plan is designed to do that. So deployment plans have steps, and steps have data sets. So you can see here, I only have one data set per step. So this will all run sequentially. So when step one runs, it'll run the legal entity, just the one I ran just a few minutes ago. And then when that one completes, it will move on to financial book and so on. If there was more than one data set in a step, like we have with CPQ templates, all of the data sets in a single step will fire off all at the same time as well. Okay. I think, looking at the clock, I've got to stop the demo and move on to the next part. And this is where I'm going to turn it over to Kristen. And if you could just spend maybe 1, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, or 4 or 5, take the rest of the time, I don't care, talk about how the deployment team uses ATG, the ATG's deployment team uses it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Steph. So again, just to remind everybody, I am a deployment DevOps SME at ATG. We use Prodly to deploy client implementations in day-to-day, several times a week. So I guess the first thing that I would like to do is just set the stage. I think that most people who are in this chat or are in this webinar are here because they've had the pain of using a manual data loader. And we have done that in the past too, and we still do sometimes. So I'm just going to, as I walk through this, kind of compare back to how our experiences have been over the last couple of years, and then in the last year since we started using Prodly. So one of the biggest challenges we've repeated a couple of times already on this webinar is that relational data aspect when you're moving data. So in the past, when you move record data, you'd have to like populate manually an external ID, figure out some sort of unique mapping, do VLOOKUPs in Excel. and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And sometimes it would be a really, really strenuous manual process for us to figure out exactly how to map data in our source org to data in our target org. And with Prodly, like Steph said, they have a lot of resources to explain this process more, but their virtual external ID really just completely automates that process for us. In addition, if you think about the maintenance of a pre-existing CPQ or billing solution, billing is getting to a phase now where some people are needing updates to their existing billing solutions because they've had them for long enough that their organizations are changing. So being able to maintain that external ID external to Salesforce and not depend on users to manually populate it, and be able to do upserts, again, completely seamlessly with no need for manual intervention, that's just a huge time saver. I think the other point that I would really like to talk to you guys about is when you do manual data loads, you have to redo them every single time you move orgs. So if it takes you 8 hours the first time, it takes you 8 hours the second and the third, no matter how many orgs you have. One thing that we've really found as kind of a value add for our personal use of Prodly is that that's not the case. It's kind of a curve. So the first time, it may take you a couple of hours to add all your custom objects, make sure the data sets are all configured. Even the first time, it's still less than a manual data load. But then after that, once you have all your data sets refined, you can just push a button and go and kind of go about all the other activities that you need to do for DevOps, maintaining GitHub and all of the other metadata things. And so being able to just set the deployment plan off and then continue on with the other tasks of deployment is really a huge value add for us. So that's kind of how we use Prodly on a day-to-day basis. But we've really found that it's become core to our deployment practice. And we find ourselves going back to it again and again and again. I'm a deployment specialist, but I do still work on the implementation side sometimes, just to maintain those CPQ and billing skills. But so I found myself, actually funny that we talk about this, because I find myself sometimes on projects where we begin a project and they say, here's we don't have data. And it's so great to be able to look at the client and say, I have something that I can use to enable us to get this project off the ground, and something that you can give them to the end by exporting data set templates and say, here is something that will really enable you to take care of your own CPQ billing solution after we're gone. So those are kind of the 3, 5, 7 about our use of Prodly from my perspective.
Thanks, Kristen. You struck a really important point on the head, or the nail on the head is what I'm trying to say, is that you guys are experts at doing this in doing the deployments, because you do it every day in the manual way. If you think about somebody who is buying billing and implementing billing, they don't know the schema, the architecture, they don't know the rules and the regulations of how this is supposed to be deployed. So having a tool like Moover that does this process, has the deployment plans, and handing them a tool like that to where they don't have to worry or learn and have that huge learning curve to be able to pick up the billing data and move it from one org to the other, it's so hugely valuable. I a few months ago, actually I think it was last year, I was working with one of a CPQ customer up in Canada, and working with the Salesforce Canadian customer success team, I think it was, and they had an account that was just in red, and they couldn't get it to go green because they could not solve this issue easily. And I spent about 2 hours with that customer, that CPQ customer, on the phone, getting Moover installed, getting them on a trial, and showing them how they can do this in minutes and everything. And at the end of that 2 hours, that account went from red to green. and they were happy, and they haven't opened an angry ticket since. So there's a huge value here in what Moover can do and the simplicity of it. And for SIs that are using it, they can actually hand the exact data sets that they used to their clients to be able to use this. Hugely valuable. Okay, we are running close on our time. So just kind of final thoughts and kind of wrap up and a little bit of call to action. Basically Moover with the billing toolkit, in fact, with the quote to cash toolkits that we have, is the premier solution to handle all of the reference data deployments. It doesn't matter what phase you're in. If you're just getting started, or if you're thinking about buying Salesforce CPQ, advanced approvals, and billing, and you haven't adopted it yet, this is one reason to kind of put checkbox is, can we maintain it? Can we deploy that data from one org to the other? Check that checkbox because you've got it. And like Kristen was saying, if you've had it for a while, and you're finding that you now need to update it because it's getting out of date, Moover can handle that use case as well in maintaining that. So you'll no longer have to struggle to be able to do this as well. So some call to actions as well. I think I'm supposed to just click on these. Is that right, Tori? And open these up and show them? Tori added these. Now I don't know what to do. So yeah, if you wanted to reach out and contact Prodly, I'm just going to go ahead and paste this in the chat as well. But if you would like more information about Moover, what we do, how do you get the toolkits, get a trial, what have you, this form will get you connected to one of our account executives. And then our CPQ best practice webinar. This is Max Rudman has left the adventures of Salesforce after it was required. He became our CEO back in February, and so Max on August 27th is going to share some insights and thoughts and answer your questions directly around CPQ best practices. We actually had one of these just a few weeks ago, and it was hugely successful. It was a lot of fun to have that. So this one will get you signed up for that webinar as well, and you get to ask Max direct questions. This particular page, this is where if you want to spend more fun time with me, you get the chance. There's the URL in the chat as well. This is our Moover certification workshops. So for Salesforce CPQ, Field Service Lightning, and we actually have one where we teach you how to build your own custom data sets. We have workshops on that. Our next CPQ one is coming up on July 23rd. And basically, it's free. You can sign up on all of these. You can sign up, and it's a 3-hour hands-on where you'll actually deploy CPQ data from our org to your org, our training org to an org that you stand up, and actually see how easy from a first-hand perspective. And the cool thing is you get a little certificate from a credible that you can put on your LinkedIn profile and share it out. If you have Field Service Lightning, this is a great one to learn about all of the niche things that you need to know about doing Field Service Lightning data deployments with our Field Service Lightning toolkit. And then this one, we just get hands-on in the data set editor, build a couple of different data sets around the method of VEID where we track all the record movement, or we use something very similar to a formal external ID called a composite external ID, and we build those two data sets and show you how to get all of that. So those are fun workshops as well. And we usually have a good turnout and good experience on that too. All right, so now we're going to open it up to questions. Oh, Tori is actually sharing out a survey as well. So you should see that link have popped up on the screen. If you want to open up that survey and kind of give us some feedback about today's session. Is there anything else in there, Tori? I didn't get a chance to look at the survey prior to the webinar.
No, just general feedback of how people like this, if we should continue to do them. And also, if you would like to meet with either ATG or with Prodly, you're welcome to put your email in there and let us know. We'll contact you guys.
Yeah, and so before we open it up to questions to everybody, I would first personally like to thank Sonia for all the work. She and I worked a lot getting these billing templates together. Spent a lot of time and hours and a lot of how should we do this kind of moments. And luckily Sonia made putting these templates together so seamless and so easy. So we couldn't do this and have the templates that we have today without the ATG team and Sonia. And then Kristen, thanks for coming on board and talking about your experiences with the deployment team and how you guys use that. Such a huge value to today's session. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you both, Steph and Tori, for inviting us. And it was a pleasure working with you guys, and excited to continue our relationship.
Thanks. Okay, so if you all have questions, go ahead and throw them. Let's just throw them right into the chat section. But if you do have to go, now is kind of the official end of the presentation, so feel free to drop off as well. But the time is yours. Harry says, good stuff. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Harry. Appreciate it. Okay, it's kind of quiet, so don't be shy. I don't bite too hard. Okay, Harry might be typing a question here. Signing off, but I'll be back. Thanks, Harry. Talk to you soon. Thanks, Jody. Yep, it'll be a great class. The FSL one's kind of fun. We've only done it once so far, so you'll be our second batch of the Field Service Lightning class, but the first one, we had a great turnout. We had a lot of fun with that one, so I hope you enjoy it. Okay, I think questions are kind of light today, Tori, so I'm going to throw it back to you, and let's close it on out.
All right. Well, thank you, Steph, and thank you, Sonia and Kristen, so much for joining us today. Thank you, everyone in the audience, and we hope to see you on one of our webinars or workshops in the future. Thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of your day.
Take care. Bye-bye.